Hey everyone, welcome back to another video here on the channel. Today we have a very exciting one because Hyundai was kind enough to send me the all-new 2025 Hyundai Ioniq 5N to test and review. Now unfortunately I have a shortened loan with this vehicle, about 3 days total, and I've been a little bit rushed in my overall thoughts and opinions, but it definitely does not take a long time to gather what the whole idea behind this vehicle is, what it truly brings to the enthusiast and the EV market in specific, because it offers many first of its kind features, options, all of the E-Shift technology that has been talked about from media and owners out there on the internet. And this is truly a very unique, very cool vehicle, and I'm glad that Hyundai offers something like this for those that might want to go to a full EV but still want to keep a lot of the ICE components at least there when they want them to be. And of course you can shut all of that off when you don't want it to be. Now, I was lucky enough to be able to get behind the wheel of this vehicle earlier at the 2024 Mama Spring Rally. It wasn't this exact vehicle, but it was in the exact same color, and I gave you my first raw driving impression. Make sure you guys check that video out because I was certainly very giddy, very giggly, and very excited to drive that vehicle for the first time, and I gave you my raw first reactions. But over the last 3 days or so, I certainly had enough time to gather many of the things that I both like and dislike about this 2025 Ioniq 5N. And today we're basically gonna run through those in my dedicated likes and dislikes video. So without further ado, let's not waste time and get right into it. So as usual, starting out with my list of likes with the Ioniq 5N, the first one has to be the styling. Now, I am a traditional hot hatch, not only I guess warm hatch owner myself, but a hot hatch enthusiast, and I know that this vehicle is much larger than that of a traditional hot hatch, especially over the last few decades, but this vehicle looks absolutely appropriate when it comes to the overall proportions, and the normal Ioniq 5 was already a very good looking hatchback or SUV of this type, but when you get the Ioniq 5N with its unique aggressive front fascia for additional cooling capabilities, of course the N styling, then you throw on the large 21-inch forged alloy wheels with the large brakes behind them, and then the slightly wider stance that this vehicle is also comes standard with the wheel arch moldings, the flares, and then around the back end. I think this vehicle is absolutely well done from Hyundai in terms of its styling, and I really hope it does stick around for a couple more years in its current format because I think it is one of the most attractive vehicles within Hyundai's lineup. Now, my second like with the Ioniq 5N has to do really with what's not under the hood, because at the end of the day, this is an EV, but has to do with its straight line performance and the overall output from its dual electric motors. So this vehicle is a little bit beefed up versus that of even the standard Ioniq 5 all-wheel drive. It has one motor in the back, one motor at the front for a normal output of 601 horsepower and 568 pound-feet of torque. Now with the NGS or the N-Grin boost functionality, this bumps it up to 641 horsepower for 10 seconds at a time with roughly the same amount of torque as well. And this allows for a 0 to 60 time of just 3.2 seconds. This is absolutely a very quick vehicle. Will keep up with most vehicles out on the roadway, especially under normal average driving conditions. And really you do feel like you own the road in one of these things because just how quick this is at those stoplight drag races. Now, also powering the vehicle is a slightly larger, more robust 84 kilowatt hour battery pack, which is also going to be coming to the standard Ioniq 5 refresh here for the upcoming 2025 model year in that particular vehicle. And this vehicle certainly has a lot of benefits when it comes to the battery technology, the cooling capabilities from the enhanced system that Hyundai has installed in this vehicle, because at the end of the day, this is a track-ready vehicle from the factory, which is absolutely nuts, let alone an electric vehicle, which still requires a lot of cooling that a lot of people out there don't necessarily know about. And Hyundai has provided all the performance bits, brakes, cooling, straight line speed with its dual electric motors, and all of the electronic technology and programming underneath the skin to allow this to be a very performance-oriented and track-capable electric vehicle. Now, my next like stems from this device right here. Yes, the rear window wiper That has been added to the 2025 Ioniq 5N and will be coming to the facelifted regular Ioniq 5 cars, because believe it or not, Hyundai left this feature out on the 2022 through 2024 models of the standard Ioniq 5. So like the fact that it has a rear windshield wiper, very functional, especially in winter conditions, rainy conditions, anything like that, in clearing the rear window for better visibility out of the back, because at the end of the day, this vehicle is not offered with the digital rear camera mirror that does come in the Ioniq 5 limited trim level. It just has the standard auto dimming function, so seeing out of the back window is fairly important. Now, next on my likes list has to do with the vehicle to load functionality, or the utility mode on the infotainment system. Now, unfortunately, kind of a dislike of this vehicle is it does not come equipped with the 120 volt outlet underneath the second row seats like that of the standard Ioniq 5 Limited. You only get the vehicle to load like all of the other Ioniqs here via the external charge port with either a Hyundai accessory adapter or a third-party adapter. Now, this allows for about 1.8 to 1.9 kilowatts of off-boardable power, which is actually a fairly substantial amount when you think about it, especially going back several years, because this vehicle has always had this capability. So, 1900 watts of power, roughly 16 amps, is nothing to shy away from, especially when some of the vehicles currently being offered on the market only come with 1500 watt outlets. So during power outages, stuff like that, tailgating, camping, anything like that, you can power external devices, accessories via the external charge port. And I still think that is a very nice function that is still not available from every EV on the market. Now, continuing on the same theme of charging and charge ports, my next like has to do with the charging speed and charging curve of this vehicle. Now, as I mentioned, it comes with an 84 kilowatt hour battery pack, which is roughly 7 kilowatt hours larger than that of the outgoing Ioniq 5 battery. And I did a full 10 to 80% charge test with this exact vehicle. Make sure you guys check out that dedicated video here on the channel. But I almost achieved the advertised time of 18 minutes from 10 to 80%. Now, it was just a hair slower than that, but I was able to achieve 271 kilowatts of peak charge speed at just over 51% state of charge. The charge curve on this vehicle is absolutely amazing, and really this remains one of the best charging affordable electric vehicles currently offered on the market due to that higher voltage of the battery pack around the 700 volt architecture. So EGMP is still extremely competitive in its charge rate, its charge curve, and overall charge time because of those factors going on those road trips. Now, my next like with the Ioniq 5N has to do with the available customization that one can achieve inside of this vehicle. Now, as I just mentioned, with some of the performance features and options, of course, this vehicle comes with several drive modes, including the full aggressive N mode, the N custom modes, and of course the normal drive modes up here, which include eco, normal, and sport modes, which are just kind of regular drive modes found in most Hyundai vehicles. But this one adding in the layer of N customization, not only the N e-shift, the N grin boost button up here, but all of that can be done through the N mode over here on the infotainment system. So opening up this page, you can see immediately there's a bunch of toggles here on the left side, including the N pedal, N torque distribution, N race, and drift optimizer. And then you go into the battery, it'll allow you to customize the battery temperature, track mode, drag mode, all this usual stuff, track timers. And then you get into the N custom settings like found in the Elantra N or former Veloster N. And you can customize 2 different N settings via the motor output, steering input, suspension tuning, ELSD, electronic stability control, as well as the active sound via the 3 different sound profiles you can choose or turn it off, of course. But all of this basically can be customized to the user's preference, the user's driver profile, and mapped to some of these buttons here on the steering wheel. So I think as a whole, the amount of available customization in the Ioniq 5N is just off the charts. It certainly is a highlight because, say for example, you want the full motor output, the full performance, but you want the softest suspension setting, you can do all of that in the N custom menus. So by far, this has to have one of the most customizable and user configurable drive mode selection and overall, vehicle driving dynamics that one can achieve in a newly released vehicle. Now, continuing on with some of the user customization and overall, technology inside this vehicle, the next highlight I've really liked using was these physical shortcut buttons here above the climate controls toggling back and forth between the Hyundai UI, which you have to access to get to the N mode, and that of Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. So using the media button here, you can simply press that and it will immediately bring up your Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, which is wireless inside of this vehicle because it has the updated CCNC navigation system and their latest hardware behind the scenes. Now, for example, if you want to go back to Hyundai's UI, you can simply press the home button and that will bring you back up to Hyundai's UI. You can get right into the N mode over here to say customize any of your modes. And of course, these can always be, mapped to these buttons right here for easier access. But I just like the fact that you can simply go back and forth between these two pages using the shortcut buttons provided by Hyundai on the vehicle. And I think it just makes overall day-to-day usability super easy. Now, my next like inside this vehicle has to do with the NE Shift functionality, and that is basically Hyundai programming and mimicking that of an internal combustion engine vehicle with a regular standard dual clutch transmission, for example, with no transmission at all, simply using the electric motors. Now, this absolutely blew my mind. If you guys watch my first impressions driving review up at the Mama Spring Rally,
What in the...
I was absolutely dumbfounded by the NE Shift and how well it actually worked. And I'm happy to say, spending a little bit more time behind the wheel, it is absolutely insane. The the engineers that work behind this function, how well they were able to mimic a dual clutch transmission using simply software and the electric motor components that they have access to. So essentially the NE Shift works in both fully automatic mode and normal mode. It can be done in N mode. And basically, if you change the drive modes, it changes how aggressively the shifts happen, where the shifts happen, and all of the mapping that is done with the transmission, if you will, inside of this vehicle without a transmission. I mean, it is absolutely dumbfounding how well done and how well implemented it is inside this vehicle. It is something you absolutely have to experience if you're an electric car owner or enthusiast, or are just never have driven an electric car but want to see what one's like. And you can turn it on and off, which is the best part, because you get the best of both worlds between a smooth, well-refined electric vehicle and one of a really raw, performance-oriented vehicle that might not be ultimately as fast with the shifting turned on, but it is a hell of a lot of fun with just how rowdy this vehicle can get. I think my last and final real big like with this vehicle has to do with the N Performance bucket seats. Now, these are very similar in design to that of, say, the Elantra N seats with the Alcantara suede inserts, or going back even to the refresh facelifted Veloster N, which had similar bucket seats, but the materials weren't quite as nice. Now, in the Ioniq 5N, they take the seats one step further because they still offer the 6-way manual adjustment with height, recline, of course, the sliding back and forth. But Hyundai was able to add heated and ventilated functionality to these seats, which I absolutely applaud them for, because on those warmer days, it actually has been in the 80s here, believe it or not, in late October. The ventilated seats are very, very nice to have, just allow for a little bit of additional airflow with this suede Alcantara material, and they certainly do a great job of holding you in place while doing some aggressive or track type of driving, and do have the illuminated N logo still up in the headrest portion, which stands out, in darker nighttime conditions. So seats are certainly a highlight. I know some people wanted power memory seats, maybe slightly less aggressive in a vehicle like this, but personally, I think it suits it extremely well. These are the seats you really do need for, aggressive track type of driving. And I'm glad Hyundai was able to add that ventilated functionality in addition to the heat for those warmer summer months or track drives where you might not want to run the AC but do need a little bit of additional cooling. So I think that's pretty much going to do it here for my list of dedicated likes with the Ioniq 5N. Now let's get into the things that I don't love so much about it, some of which are fairly easy to tweak on the interior. A few of the other ones are, somewhat to do with the overall packaging for the US market in specific. Now, starting out here on the interior, my first dislike with the Ioniq 5N has to do with the climate control menus and shortcut buttons found just below those physical buttons. Now, this is the same overall climate control shortcuts as that of the 2022 through 2024 Ioniq 5s, and it's always been a gripe of mine inside of these vehicles. Now, I say that's a gripe because for the upcoming 2025 standard Ioniq 5 lineup, they've actually addressed all of my concerns with this climate control panel right here, because they've separated out physical buttons for the heated ventilated seats, heated steering wheel, and also revised, what these buttons do in what order, etc. So, for example, you have the 3 normal auto modes, which is fine for the overall fan speed. You have dual zone automatic temperature, and all of the defroster and, fan directions are somewhat located on here. But just to get into your heated and ventilated seats, for example, you have to get this temp button with the heated and heated steering wheel button. That opens up a page here on the actual infotainment system and gives you shortcuts to the heated ventilated seats and heated steering wheel. Now, I wish that was just a button here on the cabin so you didn't have to go to the actual screen just to turn those functions on or off. And similarly with the climate controls, you have to do that to operate certain functions of the AC and or heat. For example, if you want to turn the sink on and off, or the AC button, you have to go up to the screen to do all that. Where, like I said, in the upcoming 2025 Ioniq 5 standard car refresh, they've addressed all of my gripes with the system, and it'll be interesting to see if that makes its way into the Ioniq 5N, given they are going to be built in different areas of the world. And I could see this car continuing on with this setup for the time being, but it also could get the refreshed interior panel. We'll just have to wait and see, because at the end of the day, the center console and stuff is going to be slightly different between each of these two vehicles. Now, my second dislike with the Ioniq 5N has to do with how it's packaged specifically for the US market. Now, this vehicle is relatively decontented, not only from other Ioniq 5Ns, at least globally, but from that specifically of the Ioniq 5 Limited. Now, some of the items that will be missing here on the Ioniq 5N versus that Limited here in the US market is a heads-up display, rear window sunshades, power seats, memory seats, the panoramic roof, fixed pane of glass, the rear digital camera mirror, and those are just the items that I was able to think of off the top of my head. So when it comes to the features, specifically the heads-up display and the panoramic sunroof, I know those are two frequently mentioned items within the community of this vehicle that people may like to see at least as an available option, or as standard equipment as part of this vehicle. Now, I totally understand the argument that Hyundai made this vehicle to be a raw performance vehicle, so that means making it as light as possible and as rigid as possible, hence likely losing the panoramic fixed glass roof up top. And it also allows for a little bit of additional headroom, I assume, as well. So I understand both sides of the argument, but the vast majority of people who I have given rides to inside this vehicle have mentioned that they would like to see a panoramic fixed glass roof, and I'm kind of indifferent about it. I totally understand the performance argument, but at the end of the day, a lot of these people are not going to be tracking this car. So having the panoramic roof isn't necessarily maybe a huge deal when it comes to ultimate weight savings, the weight balance, where the weight is inside the vehicle and center of gravity. But I think it's more of a comfort and convenience feature that would make the interior space just a little bit brighter and more welcoming. Now, my third dislike with the Ioniq 5N has to do with its door handles. Now, this is something, again, that is borrowed from that of the standard Ioniq 5, and it's always been something I've kind of been somewhat indifferent about, given I've not spent a bunch of time behind the wheel and actually, opening and closing the door on a frequent, week-long basis, for example. The reason I don't love this door handle design so much isn't so much to do with the fact that it's a retractable, motorized, flush type door handle, which a lot of electric vehicles have adopted over the recent years, but more so has to do with the overall packaging and kind of the operation. Now, the biggest gripe I have with it by far is the proximity entry touchpad on the face of the two front door handles is not sensitive enough. It does not respond to user inputs very well, and really I hope they can revise this over the next several model years and just making a little bit more sensitive to a finger touch, for example, when you want to actually lock and unlock the vehicle. Now, the second aspect I don't love about it is because, well, luckily they have included ridges and grips on the back of the door handles to actually make it easier to pull when you're coming up, for example, like this. I want to open up the door, or using your right hand to open the door. There are manufacturers out there, GM, that literally it's a smooth piece of plastic and is actually very hard to grip in comparison to how Hyundai has designed it here. So I think it was actually a well thought out design for this type of door handle, but when it comes to its actual real world operation, especially for that lock and unlock button, it's not my personal preference. I would just like to stick with the regular traditional door handle, or even one that similar Lexus has, where it mimics a real door handle, but actually just has an actuator pad on the backside to open and close the latch. Now I think that's going to bring us to my final dislike with this vehicle, and it's going to be the range that is offered. Now, I kind of went back and forth as to whether or not I really wanted to include this on my dislikes list, but ultimately I think it is something that is a somewhat of a negative, despite this vehicle offering the performance that it does both on the track and on the street. Now, during the last 3 days with this vehicle, like I said, it is a shortened week loan with it. I've been averaging just over 2 miles per kilowatt hour. Now, ultimately, that's not great efficiency, but I've been driving the vehicle, very spiritedly, hence the lower efficiency number. Now, this vehicle is actually a relatively fresh one. It only has just over 600 miles on it, believe it or not. And the total lifetime efficiency is like 1.7 miles per kilowatt hour. So my 2.4, 2.5 miles per kilowatt hour really hasn't made all that much of a difference in the lifetime average. But again, you have to keep in mind that it ultimately depends on how you're driving the vehicle, what speeds you're driving it, obviously the external ambient conditions, and this vehicle will be used for media purposes, which ultimately does not net you necessarily the best efficiency because you have the vehicle running, the heat, AC on in the inside, and you're just sitting idle, burning energy out of the battery pack. So when it comes to the overall range, the EPA rating for this vehicle is 221 miles, which is significantly lower than that of even a all-wheel drive Ioniq 5, which, like I said, for the upcoming 2025 refresh, will be getting the same 84 kilowatt hour battery pack, and Hyundai is touting a near 300 mile range for the dual motor all-wheel drive variants, and significantly over 300 for the rear-wheel drive versions. So I think 221 is definitely on the lower end of what is acceptable in today's market for an electric vehicle in general, especially compared to other performance or sporty offerings from other manufacturers. I've seen people out there say they can get more than 221, at least based on their efficiency, but ultimately, I think it is a drawback, especially when you're spending nearly $69,000, including destination, as this vehicle is equipped, and plan to use it maybe on a more daily driver basis rather than, a sports car enthusiast weekend car, just due to its price point and, ultimately what this vehicle has to offer. So range, not the best, not the worst. If you're in the city, it might be a little bit more efficient than obviously driving it out on the interstate or the highway. So do keep all those variables and factors in mind. So I think that is going to do it here for my dedicated list of likes and dislikes with the 2025 Hyundai Ioniq 5N. I want to give a huge thanks to Hyundai for sending this vehicle out for me to test and review. I do wish I got it for a full week because this vehicle is an absolutely blast to drive. I myself own a Hyundai N-Line vehicle and have really always been really invested in the N enthusiast community, both on the Facebook groups and personally with the vehicle I drive and own. I've done some of the N modifications to my personal Elantra GT N-Line, and it really is cool to see Hyundai starting to branch out and really invest themselves in a brand heritage, if you will, with this N brand globally. I really wish it was a little bit more involved here in the North American market specifically. And if you follow them on some of their Hyundai News website or on some of their social media, you'll know they recently did an event over in Korea with Toyota and partnered with some of the GR team over there to offer a Hyundai N Toyota GR enthusiast day, where they got together and basically showcased the two brands and the two vehicles, or two sets of vehicles, if you will, side by side, with some of the corporate members from each side there present in the community. And I think that was ultimately a very cool venture, and it's nice to see brands coming together and rallying behind the enthusiast car market, because at the end of the day, a lot of people aren't going to be buying these vehicles. So the ones that are truly invested and want to see brands really support them, at least in the short term, if not in the long term. And I think both of those two brands, specifically Hyundai and Toyota, are going to do that for their communities. So let me know what you guys think of the Ioniq 5N down in the comment section below. Are you guys interested in purchasing one? Do you own one of these vehicles? If you do, make sure to add any of your likes and dislikes that I may have missed or you agree or disagree with down in the comment section below. Hit that like button if you guys enjoyed it and or found something helpful. Subscribe if you haven't already. Check out that dedicated 10 to 80% charging test, because like I said, this is absolutely a charging monster when it comes to finding the appropriate DC fast charging with the enhancement Hyundai has made for the cooling and the battery technology. And I would love to own one of these vehicles, but unfortunately, when it comes to the price point and how much I actually drive per year, financially, it's a tough justification to do so. But I think in the area I live in a kind of suburban area, this is a, you know, super great daily driver. Charging at home, obviously can have a full or near 80% battery upon waking up every single day and enjoy everything that this vehicle has to offer, not focusing on the range and efficiency, because this vehicle is just great to hoon around the streets, have a blast with, set all the custom settings, the NE shift functionality, you know, to whatever you want inside of this vehicle, and just have a blast and a smile on your face. That's what I love about it. And I think that is ultimately what Hyundai designed this vehicle to do. So I'm gonna quit rambling, leave your comments, feedback down in the comment section below. I wanna give a huge thanks to Hyundai for sending this vehicle out for me to test and review. And as always, I hope to see you guys in the next one.